Okay, so this is the chart interpretation for Jim Morrison, lead singer with the Doors, also poet, director, and musician. Three main chart features: Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Taurus, and Ascendant in Aquarius. So Jim Morrison's Ascendant here, 1254. The Moon in square aspect to it at 9 degrees of Taurus, and the Sun at 15 degrees of Sagittarius. So the main themes in Jim's chart: Aquarius Ascendant and the 11th house Sun, and the chart ruler of the Ascendant is in a conjunction with the IC, which is one of the angles of the chart. Four angles in the chart: the Ascendant, the Descendant, the Midheaven, and the IC. Any planets close to these will have extra strength. Okay, so they will be more noticeable through the person's life. The effects of those planets and their influences will be present. Okay, very big Aquarius theme. Aquarius is all about humanitarianism, introducing new radical ideas, new ways of thought. It's about the future. It's about introducing new ideas. Okay, it's a friendly sign, likes to interact, likes to share information, ideas with friends and colleagues, and particularly in groups, things like that. A lot of group involvement in society and building up, even in local, small terms, local societies, and in bigger terms of government levels, changing things, introducing new ideas for the betterment of all humankind. Okay, that is enforced by the Sun in the 11th house, which corresponds to the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is the 11th sign, so it corresponds. Some particular themes are relevant with the 11th house in astrology as well. The planet Uranus ruling those close to the ascendant to reinforce that. It's very strong. It's a strong theme. On a negative side, the Aquarius theme can be rebellious. It can go against society. It can be rebellious against work, bosses at work, parents, teachers at school, those kinds of things. Rebellious to anything that seems to have control or is dominant or has rules set in place that need to be obeyed. On a negative level, Aquarius, Uranus type of themes can be extremely rebellious towards those. Okay, chart rulers Saturn and Uranus are both in Gemini. Aquarius has two rulers: Saturn, the earthly ruler, Uranus, the transpersonal ruler. The rulers are disposited by Mercury, who is the ruler of the sign of Gemini. So there's a Gemini theme as well. Three planets here in the sign of Gemini. Mars is here as well. And the Mercury ruler of that sign is in the 11th house as well, backing up that Aquarius theme. The moon is also in the third house here, which the third house has reference to the sign of Gemini, the third sign. So the moon, emotionally, there is a Gemini, an underlying Gemini theme going on here as well. So it's very airy. Aquarius and Gemini are both air signs, belong to the element of air. So it's all about thought, the sharing of information, learning, all those kinds of things. There's also a Sagittarius theme, because the Sun is obviously in Sagittarius here at 15 degrees, making a square to the asteroid Chiron up here. Chiron we also would associate with Sagittarius because of the connection to the centaur. Sagittarius, half man, half horse, depicted in many symbols and pictures and images and mythology over time. Chiron was also a centaur in mythology, so there's a strong Sagittarius kind of feel here, okay, which we're going to explore. Okay. The really tight aspects in Jim's chart, we have the Jupiter midheaven exact aspect. The midheaven at 27 degrees Scorpio, Jupiter at 27 degrees Leo, an exact square. So let's start with the Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter in your chart is where you expand and grow. It's where you have your luck and your abundance. In the sign of Leo, Leo is about self-expression creatively. It's about having fun. It's about being, Leo is the party animal, the party sign of the zodiac. Everything in Leo wants to be noticed, it wants to express. So the best way to do that is through singing, dancing, acting, drama. It's about expression, understanding your own creative abilities, your own creative talents, and sharing those and expressing those. With Jupiter in the sign of Leo, that's a big thing for Jim to self-express, to be creative, show off his creative gifts, okay, which he was abundant in. Now, the square aspect to the midheaven, I spoke about the midheaven roughly earlier on as being one of the 4 angles of the chart, the ascendant being the strongest, the midheaven being the second strongest. Any planets in aspect to those are going to be noticed in the person's life. And as an exact square aspect, squares cause action, a certain amount of tension, so things need to happen. So in Jim's life with the Jupiter in Leo, that's about expressing himself creatively in big ways. Jupiter is always about doing things big in massive, enormous ways. So the tension was for Jim to express through his midheaven. The midheaven and the lower heaven we can look at in like the tree of life of ourselves. It's where our feet and the energy of ourselves goes deep into the roots. I see the midheaven is how we grow into society, like the branches and the leaves and the blossoms. It's how we blossom into society over time. So there's a great need for Jim to express this Leo Jupiterian energy through his midheaven. Okay. Very tight degree, so it was prominent in his life. Okay. Now Pluto square the moon, less than 1 degree. 9 degrees of Taurus is the moon. 8 degrees of Leo is Pluto. Pluto is also very close to the descendant, which has extra strength. We're going to talk about that a bit deeper in a few minutes. Now, Sun square Chiron. Sun 15 degrees of Sagittarius, Chiron 15 degrees of Virgo. In a square less than 1 degree. Now, any aspects to the Sun has an effect and influence on your life purpose. The Sun is the purpose of our life. It's what we came here to live. It's the reason we came here to live. So Jim came Sagittarius, square to Chiron. Chiron, as I mentioned earlier, both these, the planet, the Sun, the asteroid Chiron in Sagittarius, it has a centaur, very strong Sagittarian theme. So the centaur Chiron is also known as the wounded healer. This is where we are wounded and which we will never heal from, but we can spend a lot of time researching how we may possibly heal, and through learning all this knowledge over time we can pass healing on to others. Now, it's a very powerful asteroid, and in close aspect in square to Jim's Sun, we can see the energy of that played out in his life quite a lot. Now, what Chiron represents, now in the 8th house, the house of death, transformation, rebirth, those kinds of things. It doesn't mean physical death, it just means a rebirthing process, kinds of like the phoenix, when the phoenix dissolves and burns away into the ashes and then transforms and it becomes reborn. So there's a big phoenix transformation kind of theme with the Chiron as well. During Jim's childhood, he reported of traveling with his family. They witnessed a car accident, road traffic accident. There was Indians scattered over the highway, covered in blood. And that is an image that stuck with Jim through all of his life. He spoke about it in his books, through his poetry, through his song lyrics. So it greatly affected him as a child. So the feature of the death, okay, the death thing and the rebirth, that was a thing that really caught hold of Jim. And it was like one of those images that stuck with him through time. So it was a deep wounding from childhood, which you often find with Chiron. Something happens in childhood that sticks with you for a long time, for all of your life, basically. So that was a very strong feature, uh, something that happened in Jim's life, which stuck with him through all of his life. Pluto square moon, very, very deep. The moon is about emotions, how you deal with yourself internally, emotionally, how you look after yourself. It is all the things you need to feel secure in life. Now, the moon in the sign of Taurus Taurus is a sign of stability and things that last. So Taurus is like the rock solid earth sign. It's what strong foundations can be built on. So the sun needs a lot of security. So it would need money issues, personal possessions, all these things, and strong values, very important for a Taurus person. Little bit of conflict with the ascendant sign and the sun sign. Sagittarius wants to roam, wants to be free. Aquarius likes to be free as well, free from rules and structure. It likes to change. So there's a bit of conflict from the moon, and Taurus wants to be grounded, and the ascendant, which wants to change, and Sagittarius energy, which wants to be free and travel and roam. Okay, so there's an inner conflict between these. The Pluto square moon, again, can be very transforming on a deep level emotionally. There's pressure from Pluto to transform emotionally. Okay, so it's about constant rechecking the emotions and rebuilding. Can be difficult for a Taurus because Taurus can get very grounded and structured and set in the ways, but the pressure coming from Pluto can be very strong and force the transformation to happen. Whether it happens easily or not, it's going to happen. Their Jim did and will transform. Will and did, rather. Okay. Major aspects: T-square, Sun, Mars, and Chiron. We have the Sun and Chiron aspect coming in an opposition to Mars. Mars is about divine action, divine will. It's the fighting principle for the Sun, which is the life purpose. Mars and Gemini is driven to learn, driven to collect information. Very curious mind, and will read whatever, read, learn, attend classes, and we know he was educated. And he was also interested in learning. When we bring in the Chiron, he was heavily involved with the occult, learning all about the occult and different kinds of spirituality as well. We can even see the Chiron play out in the Chiron energy as well. Also goes through the roots of ancestry. It goes back generations through the bloodlines. So we heard of Jim researching his own bloodlines, which led him back to County Down in Northern Ireland. He traced the Morrison line back to County Down. So that led him on to researching Celtic spirituality. And in a ceremony, he hand fasting, which is similar to a wedding, but it's the joining of two souls in this life. So that was a Celtic pagan ritual that Jim was involved in with, I think, Patricia Keneally, a music journalist. Okay, so that's the Chiron energy again, the Mars energy in researching everything related to Chiron. Chiron in the 8th house as well as everything hidden and occult based. Okay. The sun is also, this part here, the sun is also in opposition. It's within 2 degrees of opposition from the midpoint of the ascendant rulers, Saturn here and Uranus just here. The midpoint will be 17 degrees of Gemini. The sun is at 15 of Sagittarius. So there's an opposition between the midpoints. So it's about between Saturn and Uranus. The 2 planets are really at odds because Saturn wants to control, discipline, and limit everything. Uranus wants to change things, for the better. So the key to managing these 2 energies in the chart is understanding the rules, first of all, understanding what's in place, how it works from the core, and then using the Uranus energy to change that from within. So Uranus, this is where the rebellious side of Uranus comes in. Uranus looks at what is structured and disciplined and will just say, that's not happening anymore. I disagree with that. And then all hell breaks loose. And there's arguments, fights, even wars, everything, anything that can be quite destructive. Rebellious is the key word here with this. But the key to getting this energy right is understanding the core of how it works and then using intelligence and thought, radical thought, to introduce new ideas, to change things more, to use the existing structures to change and improve. Okay, so Jim was kind of caught in the middle with his opposition from the sun, within 2 degrees of the midpoint of these 2 planets. So Jim was caught in a position of having to please authority and structure, and at the same time wanting to have to change it. But we know he was quite rebellious in certain ways, okay, which we will see later on when we look at some of his transits. Okay, Moon in T-square with Pluto and Venus. Yet the Venus is in a wide opposition to the Moon. Moon and Venus, 2 feminine energies. And with the Pluto energy here, it's about transforming. Okay, so that's another square here in particular with the Moon and the Pluto, quite intense emotionally for Jim. A lot of inner turmoil could be the right thing. We also know by Pluto being very close to the descendant ruling relationships, what we attract and what we receive, what we attract and project onto others. So the Pluto energy would be, in Jim's life, it would have been, he would have been projecting Pluto energy and sometimes attracting it as well. Through his relationships, we also know there was a lot of turbulence with Pamela Curson. They always seemed to be together at the end, but there was lots of different fallings out and then making up with each other. So there's a lot of transformation and rebirthing within that particular relationship of his. Okay. Other influences, midheaven and ascendant rulers are in aspect to each other. So Mars, the personal ruler of the midheaven in Scorpio, is at 11 degrees Gemini. Pluto, 8 degrees of Leo. They are in sextile aspect to each other, so it's harmonious with the midheaven. So Jim was pretty driven in his midheaven energy. Uranus, the ruler of the ascendant, at 6 degrees Gemini, also in sextile aspect to Pluto. Okay, and we have the Uranus and Saturn sharing the sign of Gemini as well. Okay, so yes, the ascendant and the transpersonal rulers of the ascendant and the midheaven are in aspect to each other, which means a harmonious working between the 2 points. Okay. Moving on to Jim's transits. This transit was on the 8th of December 1968. These 2 points were conjunct. So Neptune, transiting Neptune, made a conjunction to Jim's midheaven. Now, this transit had been happening from January of 1968 up until November of 1969. Neptune would have been transiting within 1 degree either side of his midheaven. And this is when Jim started to lose control. Reports of heavy drinking, turning up to the studio drunk. It was so bad, the producer they had for the first 3 or 4 albums couldn't work on the last album because Jim was out of hand, couldn't control him. One of the things he said about Jim was Jekyll and Hyde kind of character. As we see with Jim, there's quite a lot of Gemini energy, the twin energy. And what he described Jim as Jekyll and Hyde, 2 different people. Sometimes he would come into the studio and he would be friendly and cool guy, sound friendly guy. And then when he started drinking, the other personality took over and he would be uncontrollable. He was not that same Jim that came in to the studio earlier. So Neptune, the themes of Neptune is about escapism. So what Jim chose to do was escape to his midheaven, to escape through drugs and alcohol. A more positive way to use Neptune energy would be through spiritual work, meditation, and getting heavily involved in creative ability, creative talents. Okay, so he was involved in the music, but he was also escaping heavily through alcohol and drug abuse. Okay. This is the event of 1st of March 1969. The band were playing a gig. I'll quickly run through the transits that were happening. The moon was opposite Mercury on the Aquarius ascendant. That was on the particular day. Uranus, the ruler of the chart, because it rules the sign of Aquarius, by transit was up here, transiting Neptune, which was having an effect on the transiting Neptune on the midheaven as well. So there was a shocking incident that particular day. Jim, his Mercury as dispositor of the planetary rulers of Aquarius, transited Jim's ascendant. He acted. So he tried to start a riot. I think he described the police. He was calling the police the little blue men, something like that. And he was inciting the crowd at the concert to act out on the police, start a riot, basically. And during that incident, he was accused of exposing himself. He threatened it on stage. Other witnesses say he didn't actually do it, but other sources say he did actually do it, and he found himself in court to defend himself from those allegations. Yes, the transiting moon would have activated the square, his Pluto moon square. with natal Venus representing hidden sexual urges. Yeah, with Venus in Scorpio. Scorpio energy here, Scorpio in the midheaven with Pluto ruling. Very, very deep sexual intense energy. Scorpio energy is water based. It belongs to the water element, so it's emotional, but it's intense emotions. It's very deep and it's very serious. Okay. So quite an event there on that particular day, especially with the transits backing up the event. Okay, the death of Jim Morrison. Now, before I get into this, whatever these transits are, does not mean that if anyone has a transit, a Pluto transit to the midheaven or a Jupiter transit to the midheaven, it doesn't mean they're going to die. There's no way. Well, some astrologers try to predict death, but I would never try to predict death. I think death is out of our hands, basically. But these are the events, these are the astrological events that happened. Okay, so we can see the divine timing in action here. Now, transiting Pluto was in sextile to the midheaven, 27 degrees of Scorpio. Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio, at 27 degrees of Virgo in sextile aspect to each other. It's a harmonizing aspect, so things happen with ease generally with sextiles. Transiting Jupiter was conjunct the midheaven at the same time. Jupiter, 27 degrees of Scorpio, midheaven, natally 27 degrees of Scorpio. Okay. In the sky at the particular time, Jupiter was also in conjunction with Neptune. And we know how Jim used the transiting Neptune to escape drugs and alcohol. What Jupiter does is make things bigger. On a bigger scale, it blows everything up. So what Jupiter has done here, whenever the energy came over Jim's midheaven, he was in his bathtub or whatever the reports were, but whatever drugs, alcohol, whatever he had took, he was seeking the ultimate escape. Okay, internally. Now, it did end up in the ultimate escape, which was escape of his life. His soul left his body that particular day. Okay, so that was the ultimate escape. Jupiter and Neptune together on the midheaven. So the cross of matter, the cross of matter, the midheaven. I see ascendant, descendant is how you are crucified on the earth. It's the energies that you are destined to live out in your lifetime. So Jim descended through his midheaven, and anything that's in the midheaven, anything that affects the midheaven, is on a public level. So everyone knew of his death. Okay. Transiting Jupiter and transiting Pluto activate the natal Jupiter MC square. Yeah, so Jim had Jupiter square, the MC from birth, and when the transit came round to exact square, something triggered. Okay, so Jim was wanting to use that creative energy. Maybe Jim was planning on writing some really deeply creative material, and he was taking drugs, alcohol to get himself so high he could write the best stuff, the best material he ever had. But unfortunately, he must have overdone it and took himself to the afterlife. Okay. Yes, he was approaching his Saturn return at the age of 27. About 28, between 28, 29 and a half, you'll have your Saturn return. And that's when life starts to become more real. It's a moment of maturity. So maybe inwards, Jim's inner biological clock, inner astrological clock, he knew this was coming. Maybe he didn't want to. Maybe he didn't want to mature and become more in control and responsible for his own life. But we will never know how he felt in regard to that. But it was coming. A Saturn return was coming. The midheaven. Okay, I don't know how relevant this is, but it's interesting nonetheless. Jim's midheaven, 27 degrees of Scorpio. Jim also died at 27 years of age. Just throwing it out there. Okay. So that 27th degree of the midheaven is so important, and this aspect to the midheaven as well, so significant. Okay, but to reiterate again, there's no way you could have predicted, well, you could have predicted something major was going to happen in Jim's life around this time, but you couldn't really have predicted death, because predicting death is really out of our hands. Okay, the energies definitely would have been transformational with the planet Pluto, and this midheaven is also transformational as well. Okay, but we wouldn't really predict death, even though Pluto is also in the 8th house as well. Okay, but that's what happened. Okay, by solar arc as well, 3rd of July, make sure the date's right. Yeah, 3rd of July 1971. This is also the day of Jim's death. Now, by solar arc direction, Jim's Pluto and North Node were making a square to the planet Uranus, which is charts as Jim's chart ruler. Okay, 6 degrees 27 seconds of Gemini is Jim's natal Uranus. The midpoint between Jim's Pluto and North Node would be 627, okay, of Virgo at that particular point in time. So the midpoint would have been making an exact square to the chart ruler. Okay, so that transformational theme would have been very present by solar arc direction. Okay, divine timing again. Okay, I started doing these charts of different celebrities, different famous people. I'm trying it to see how it goes. So if anyone is interested in obtaining one of these, just get in touch. Okay. Star Drifter Astrology, you find me on Facebook. You can email me, text, telephone. I can do the personalized chart designs as well for individuals, any individual. And I also do personal chart interpretations, and in that include natal interpretation, the interpretation of the birth chart, all the strong themes, aspects, and energies in the chart which will play out in the life, which you will notice, and also transits, solar arc directions, other forecasting techniques, progressions, solar returns, all those kinds of things I can do as well in personal readings. Okay, so I hope this was helpful or informative. So get in touch, leave comments. Thank you.